Hello, and welcome to Booked Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for young adults, new adults, and the forever young adult at heart. I'm your host, Kathleen, a collections librarian.
And I'm your co-host, James, an adult services librarian.
And today we are discussing Moth by Amber McBride.
Moth is a book that is different from the ones that we've read this season, in the fact that it's written in verse. And before we talk about it and what we thought about it, I'm just going to give you the book intro as usual. So, Moth has lost her family in an accident. Though she lives with her aunt, she feels alone and uprooted, until she meets Sani, a boy who is also searching for his roots. If he knows more about where he comes from, maybe he'll be able to understand his ongoing depression. And if Moth can help him feel grounded, then perhaps she too will discover the history she carries in her bones. Moth and Sani take a road trip that has them chasing ghosts and searching for ancestors. The way each moves forward is surprising, powerful, and unforgettable.
So we are going to be very serious today about our spoiler warning because there is quite a twist ending to this book, and we're going to be talking about it quite a lot. So if you haven't read the book, as mentioned, it's in verse. It's super fast. There's a great audio recording as well. So please take the time, listen to it, read it, and then come back because we have a lot to talk about.
Okay. And so, what did we think about this book?
Well, I recommended this book to you, so I'm really curious about what you thought. I thought it was really beautifully written. I thought the way that Amber McBride used language to describe Moth's thoughts, the accident that she was in prior to the beginning of the book, all of the discussions she has with Sani, the song lyrics. She really does a great job of writing something very poetic and beautiful. I think we're really going to get into the ending later, which is where I have maybe some more reservations. But first, I want to hear what you thought.
So, I'm gonna stand with you right there and say that this book is beautifully written. The way that Amber McBride uses simile and metaphor, and just the way that she uses the language in verse to tell this story of two teens discovering who they are through a road trip, even though at the end one of them does kind of discover that they are not. Beautiful, well done, very moving, extremely powerful images. I will say I did have some reservations about it after finishing it. I might not have been as put off by the kind of twist and that kind of ending that it eventually led to. But I felt a little overwhelmed at times reading this. There was just so much to pay attention to. A lot of the prose was just so rich that it was very difficult to keep it all in track in my own head. I sometimes found myself losing the plot and being kind of confused about what was happening and how much time had passed, and I was kind of struggling with the narrative of this versus the lyrical kind of progression that the book was going for.
I think that's a great point to make, and I think in light of the ending, that actually makes a lot more sense to me. I think absolutely it is kind of fragmentary, and it feels that perhaps the only way that this story could be told is through poetry and through a novel in verse.
Yes.
And we're going to go right into it. I think that is because at the end of the novel, we realize, and Moth realizes, that she actually died in the accident that her family died in, and she has been dead the whole time.
Yeah, I found it kind of both very funny and kind of devastating that Moth is a ghost with survivor's guilt that kind of haunts her throughout the whole book. And just the idea of a ghost that has survivor's guilt it's kind of inherently funny because you're a ghost, so you did not survive. But also, that you could have so much emotional attachment and trauma that it keeps you there to the point where you don't even know you're dead and you have that survivor's guilt. The death was not an escape in that sense. You get all the negativity of surviving an accident when you didn't even survive the accident. It's really upsetting.
That really is the worst of both worlds.
It's just awful. So when you read the book the first time, you don't really have any idea that this is happening. And I think that cleverly, because the novel's in verse, you get a lot of kind of really direct and metaphorical glimpses into how the characters, Moth and Sani, are feeling about each other. It's very honest in that sense, where you're not getting any kind of like, oh, does the character really mean what they're saying and thinking here? The benefit, I think, of the way that it's told in verse is that it's not super clear what's going on, but it's not obscuring it. You really get deeply into these characters' heads very quickly. So it's hard to picture Moth as not being there and disconnected from the world in any more of a way than she feels she is, because she does feel disconnected from the world. She feels like she's not seen. She feels like people ignore her and that she's drifted off ever since the accident. But, it's not like we're getting moments where we're like, oh, that's because she's a ghost right away. You have to, after you've figured that out at the end and you come back, you can see, the fact that she's dead is just feeding into these feelings that she already had prior to the accident. And it's just even worse. It's just sadder.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see just how well that works as a metaphor, being a ghost, not being seen. Sonny is really, he's literally the only person can see her, but he's also, it's so strange to talk about because, on a first reading, it makes sense that here's this romance, here's this character who really forms an emotional connection with her, so he sees her in that sense. But then, of course, at the end, we realize that he has this special gift or curse, he's not really sure, but that allows him to see her literally. And so this idea, he wants her to haunt him, the idea of haunting, all of these things, they take on such a different meaning on a second reading. And that was actually why I was really excited to read it, because I had read it before and obviously didn't know the ending. And then this time I was able to look for kind of those clues, and it's just so metaphorically resonant, I think, and the whole ghost aspect, it doesn't feel cheap or kind of like a silly twist ending, I don't think, because as you said, she was a ghost just on a different level, on that not a literal level, and then this is just kind of also the literal way that it works.
Yeah. I feel like, this might be a book that you should read first rather than listen to, I think, just because the text is so rich. There's so many cool things that Amber McBride does with the individual poems that make up the story. There's a part I remember vividly when she's talking about her parents in the accident. She will mention her parents and then she'll have their names in parentheses all the time. And it's just like a little kind of way of it's like an afterthought because they're in the past. It's like a referral to something that's not in the present. Just so many cool little tools that she uses to kind of express these ideas. And I think that, when Moth and Sonny meet each other and they decide to kind of go on a road trip together to find themselves, that the structure of the book works really well to kind of guide the reader along with it.
Yeah, the book is really deliberately designed, which I think is great. I read an article where Amber McBride describes this, but basically she has deliberately constructed the book in 4 sections that mirror the stage of an actual moth's life cycle. So we see at the beginning kind of the egg. Moth is in the suburbs. She's kind of stifling there, and she's, no one is seeing her, I guess literally, but this is where she meets Sonny and where the story kind of takes off. So then we get to the caterpillar stage, which is the road trip, and this is where they're both coming into their own, I think, and there's a little bit more self-discovery at that stage. And then the cocoon stage of the Navajo Nation, and then finally she emerges fully as a moth at the end, and that's partly with her realization. And also there's this thought that gets expressed at the end where Moth is described as having wings she grew herself. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of her Moth stage. And so we see that I think there is a tragedy in the fact that she stuck around, but also maybe it's a testament to her strength.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that the fact that Moth did not survive the accident is such a pivotal kind of turning moment that it takes up a lot of space in the room. I think that Sonny's journey is also very well communicated in this kind of idea of the Moth's life cycle, because he's also fallen into himself in the suburbs where he's struggling to express himself. And so when he decides to take the leap and leave with Moth to go on the road trip, he's also going through those stages, but like the caterpillar stage where he's kind of growing and exploring and finding himself alongside Moth, the cocoon stage where he's kind of right on the precipice of becoming, but he doesn't want to let go of Moth at that point. Like right towards the end, he kind of feels like if he takes whatever that next step is, and at least in the text when I read it looking back, I got the sense that he didn't want to let go. He didn't want it to end because he felt that whatever came next, maybe he wouldn't be able to do it together with Moth.
I think he really does have this struggle where he has an ability and he's not sure how to frame it. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? For him to heal, for him to grow, does he need to leave it behind? Does he need to leave Moth behind? And so I think that's a real struggle for him that he has to come to terms with.
Yeah. Because I think through the course of the book, they have kind of like a faded relationship. I'm not sure if you want to talk anymore about the cultural and kind of religious practices that are referenced in this book to connect these two characters together.
So to give just a little backstory, I think it is important for us to acknowledge that Moth is in mourning over the death of her grandfather, which is semi-autobiographical for Amber McBride. This is the context in which she wrote the story. And so she has her gray-bearded grandfather who was basically a practitioner of hoodoo. So this idea of root work is another word for hoodoo, and the concept of these magical traditions that are kind of connecting Moth to their ancestors.
So an oversimplified definition of what hoodoo is it's a set of spiritual practices and traditions that were originally created and emerged from enslaved Africans in the North American South, which is a mix of things that are based on traditional African beliefs and also sometimes Christianity and other spiritualities that kind of got mixed in there. That's a very gross oversimplification of what that is. But Amber McBride talks about it as medicine, magic, balance, and a reminder that you're never alone. And that's the kind of things that she wanted to bring from the tradition of hoodoo into this book and the way that Moth and Moth's grandfather practice it.
Exactly. And so in addition to hoodoo, with Sani's character, we're talking about Navajo beliefs, creation myths, and traditions there. So Amber McBride talks about a bit that her aunt is Navajo and her family road trip to New Mexico, and her experience there and her talking with her aunt kind of informed the creation of Sani's character, and also the sympathies between the two belief systems and traditions and the history of being marginalized people, I think, is one thing that really draws Sani and Moth together. So this idea of this healing journey, for example, we see at the beginning of their road trip, their first stop is to Thomas Jefferson's plantation. So these are all themes, these are all things that the characters are thinking about, that Amber McBride is thinking about, and that are really informing the characters and are really important to the story. And not to get away from it too much, but hoodoo is essentially the reason that Moth and Sani are drawn together.
Yes. Her grandfather did some kind of working or saw something that led him to believe that if Moth was not able to meet Sani, then she would wander forever. So when at the end of the book, when they finally reach the Navajo Nation, the end of their road trip, the end of their road together, the end of their summer vacation kind of thing, Sani's father, says, I knew Moth's grandfather, and he had said that this would happen, and this is like fated. And at that point, it becomes too much for either Sani or Moth to deny that this is happening. And that's when Moth kind of, she leaves. She moves on. Sani becomes more comfortable in himself, and eventually it's revealed that he does succeed in what he wanted to do. He's a successful performer, and he credits it to Moth's intervention in his life. It's a really kind of beautiful and moving story. I think that I really enjoyed it overall. I like the idea of the fact that there was a ghost in this book the whole time, like the idea of I think you had said something about like spirits as like a metaphor for trickster spirits and dangerous spirits and like spirit guides. There's a whole bunch of things that's going on here in the background that when it comes to light, you can really just appreciate it all the more.
Yeah, it's definitely a very layered work, which I like, so that it does reward rereading. And so I think we just touched upon this briefly. So you read the physical book. Mm-hmm. I listened to the e-audio book, and I had also read the physical book previously. So it really does feel that maybe the best way to read it is twice, and to read it in both formats, because they both have different things that they bring to the table. And there is so much, it is so rich, that I think you do need to see it written down, but you also do need to hear it. I think hearing it really does give it another level that I appreciated on this listen.
Yeah, and just talking about, I have to mention, just seeing it written down on the page there's just some really incredible moments. At the end, when they're kind of at the pivotal moment of when Moth is basically being told that she had died, there's an incredible poem. I think it's the poem's called Hummingbird Moth, where it ends with the line, "My scar inches open and open," as she's kind of getting closer to understanding the truth. And then the title of the next poem is just the words, "and open." And then you read the poem and you're feeling like the movement of these moments are so distinct and powerful, especially when the next poem's title is "and open and open." And then one after that is "and open and open and open." And you can see just how Amber McBride wants to take these individual moments and highlight them so clearly. They're so happening so quickly, but they're so impactful. Just incredible. I had to take a break after reading, just looking at that. Seeing the poems and written out in the way they are is just incredible. I'm excited to take a listen to it too and hear how that was kind of conveyed via audio. So definitely a thing to look at if you're interested in books in verse and listening to them being read to you.
So why don't we just get a little more in depth to the ending? Because
Okay.
I think this is maybe the most controversial part of the book. I've seen different opinions online, and I feel that maybe I am a little uncomfortable with it. So do you think, and we did talk about this a bit, but do you think that Moth being a ghost is appropriate? Do you feel that Sonny's trajectory is what you want for him? And do you think that the book as a whole, as a cohesive whole, works?
I think that the book certainly works as a cohesive whole. I don't think that Moth needed to be a ghost. I think that does add some additional depth to it. Potentially, it could lead people to react in the same way as they would when someone tells them at the end of a book, like, oh, it was only a dream. Or, people might not appreciate having, the Sixth Sense rug kind of pulled out on them again.
James, did you just ruin a movie? Spoilers for a movie that came out over 20 years ago.
Spoilers for The Sixth Sense. Sometimes people just don't like that, and they might have, perfectly valid reasons for it as well. I didn't really have much of a problem with it. My issues weren't really with the ending. It's just I'm not sure. It might have been with the relationship between Moth and Sonny and Sad. I'm not sure. It felt like it developed very quickly in a lot of ways, and for it to be resolved in such a sweet manner, I didn't know how I felt about that.
The notorious YA insta-love. Well, I guess we could argue that their bond makes sense because it turns out to be fated, which also feels a little bit like a YA convention, the fated love story. But it does happen very quickly. I do agree. And one of the things that actually makes me a little uncomfortable and I think still uncertain, I think the book is great and I think it deserves the accolades it's gotten. I do wonder if I really feel that seeing Sonny succeed at the end when it feels so much like Moth's story, if it feels like it sidelines her too much. I mean, I don't know where it can really go because she needs to kind of cross over and come to terms with the fact that she's died. But she feels a little bit maybe like a manic pixie spirit girl at the end.
Oh.
She's helped Sonny live life and come to terms with his demons, and now he gets to be alive and she's still dead.
I feel like I can definitely see where you're coming from there. I do feel, though, that she did help Sonny as much as he helped her. They both did need to help each other based in the way that the book set it up. Moth feeling that she was too full of life, and that's why she survived the wreck. And then Sonny just being just so unsure of what he should do with his life and how he should handle his living situation. I feel like they did help each other, so I was kind of pleasantly, surprised that we did get a bit where we did get to see Sonny's flourishing. Moth's flourishing, I think, is understated in a lot of ways because she says in the book, she's like, how do you remember how to die, I think. And it's heartbreaking to kind of read that. And it's like, you really can't have a triumphant remembrance that you've died and you're leaving in a lot of ways. The book just certainly does gesture towards this very moving, spiritual kind of, moving on. But I didn't really have too much of a problem with it. But I think that I should probably just give a quote. And the problem with quotes in this book is that there's just so many good quotes. There's just so many good lines and things like that. So I'm just going to have to give one of my favorites, which is Moth describing the accident in which her family died, which was 2 summers ago, our car broke in half like a candy bar on the freeway, and we all spilled onto the pavement as crumbled as sticky caramel peanut filling. Just gruesome, disgusting, and so upsetting.
It is funny because it takes something that should be delicious and delightful, and you really can see the way it's turned, and the idea of that it's nothing inherently disgusting, and she manages to make it so visceral and so upsetting, and it's a recurring theme throughout, and it really is a good image that sticks with you.
It's a sticky image for sure. There's a lot of those callbacks going on throughout this book that I did appreciate. So I think, I did like this book. I definitely had some reservations about it, but that might just be my own personal tastes with books in verse rather than anything structurally about it or anything like that.
Okay, so you're still going to come back for another episode?
Yes.
All right.
This didn't chase me away.
I didn't fail you.
No.
All right.
So, Kathleen, do you have any suggestions for books that people could read that are similar to this one?
I do. So I think I've probably brought this book up a bunch of times, but Jason Reynolds is pretty much the king of YA in verse, and we actually did one of his books on the podcast last year, but this book in some ways did remind me of Long Way Down because it's also a ghost story of sorts, and also a novel in verse and beautifully written. So it's basically about a kid named Will who is riding the long way down in this elevator to avenge the murder of his brother. He has a gun that he plans to use, but on every stop of the elevator, it's stopping on every floor, and he's basically encountering kind of like, it's almost like a Christmas Carol or something, these ghosts who are teaching him to think about what he's going to do and to help him decide, does he really want to commit this violent act? And very heavy, very beautifully written, and deeply moving. So in a way, it kind of reminded me of that with the ghost story. I also wanted to recommend a book I just finished recently, The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is about a boy coming to terms with his identity as a mixed-race gay teen, going to university and becoming the drag artist, The Black Flamingo. So it's all about the same kind of themes of identity, coming into your own, and kind of flourishing that we see in Me, Moth. I thought the writing was really strong. You really feel like you're there in Michael, the main character's story. He feels like such a fully realized character, and I really enjoyed being immersed in this world, so I highly recommend that one, also a book in verse.
Well, thank you for those read likes, Kathleen. So I think that's going to do it for us here at Book Solid for this month.
So James, what are we reading next?
So the book we will be reading next is Every Heart Adore by Shauna McGuire. This is a book about kids who have visited other worlds, much like one would visit Narnia, where you kind of step through a portal and then you kind of have an adventure in another realm, and they've come back. But this book's premise is that those magical places that the kids go to, they don't really need those kids after they've solved the issue. So they sometimes find their ways back into the regular world where they have to kind of deal with the fact that they just went on a life-changing adventure where they were heroes. And then now they're just kind of back here with their everyday problems and their everyday issues. And sometimes they can't handle it because they've changed as people. So in this book, they get sent to a place under the care of Miss West, who understands these children's problems and takes care of them as they come to terms with their lives, and as some of them try to figure out ways to get back to the worlds that rejected them. But there is a murder at the home that they're staying at, and the characters need to figure out what's going on, or maybe none of them will ever get back to their worlds again.
Well, that is very intriguing, and you had me at murder, so I'm very excited to discuss that next month.
Yes. Can't wait to talk about the book with you. So I think that's it for us at Book Solid again. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Bonus content. Bonus content. Hey everyone, this is just a quick little piece of bonus audio that we recorded just kind of after the show, or just kind of us offhandedly talking about ghosts based on, the subject of the book, but that didn't really fit in the podcast anywhere. Hope you enjoy it. So, Kathleen, have you ever had any ghostly encounters?
As a matter of fact, James, I have. And no matter what anyone says, it was real. So, 2 words for you. Haunted bathroom. Picture it.
I'm trying not to.
So, my freshman year of college, I was working in what was formerly known as the morgue tunnels of my college, Fordham University. And, they were in the morgue tunnels when I was there. It was a language lab. But, previously, morgue tunnels. So, sets the scene. I went to the bathroom downstairs when I was working late one night. And I walked into one stall, and immediately the stall on the far end started shaking violently. And I knew it was a ghost, because what else could it be? That night I ran out and I ran away, and I went back to work, and I said, the bathroom's haunted, as you do.
You gotta warn your colleagues that the bathroom has a spirit in it.
Restless spirit. So I'm in there and it's shaking, and I look under. I didn't look in the stall because the ghost was in there. I didn't want to be rude, but I did look for feet. There were no feet. It was an empty bathroom. It was absolutely empty except for the ghost and me.
Yeah, there's clearly no other explanation for what that could have been.
Clearly.
Yeah. Well,
more tunnels.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
You can have a ghost story too. Talk about your haunted music box.
I guess, I've also had my weird encounters with things I don't understand, I was walking upstairs in my home at one point, and I have an old music box from someone in my family that's just kind of sitting on one of my dressers, and it hasn't played in decades at this point.
Decades? That sounds super haunted.
It sounds super haunted. And I'm walking by, and I just hear it, I hear some tinkling from that room, and I'm like, oh, that's a weird sound. So I go in. The music box is just slowly turning, and it stops. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's an old mechanism. Clearly something just gave, or some kind of thing shifted, and it started going. So as I turn to leave, right next to my ear, I just hear what sounds like someone exhaling, like, right in my ear. So, I kind of look around, and there's nothing there. And I decide that I'm going to be downstairs for a little bit. So I just don't go back upstairs for a couple hours. And, kind of weird.
That sounds like a ghost was frustrated that you refused to believe in them.
Well, they never bothered me again, so I guess me just kind of nonchalantly being like, it's time to not be up here for a little bit, let them work out whatever they were doing.
That was enough. They didn't want to bother with you after that. Yeah. But I think that definitely sounds like a haunting, and I think you should own that.
I don't think that's a haunting.
Well, we're good?
Yeah, hit that stop button.